Our first speaker is Les Klein of Quadrangle Architects. And Les, who you may have met yesterday because he was a winner of one of the prizes, has been an attendee and an angel of Idea City just about from the beginning. He and his team have also been, I do this in quotation marks, my architects for many, many years. They've worked with me in the television industry and have over the years built quite a few Znaimer Vision style street front studio-less TV stations all across Canada and elsewhere in the world. They're not the flashiest company around, not as well known perhaps as the others, but slowly, persistently, their work is coming into view. And I didn't know this, Les, but you just picked up quite an award from the Royal. Yeah, it's true. That's great. That's great. Anyways, what concerns Les here today is the Gardiner Expressway. And it's long been agreed by Torontonians that this sort of 1950s style superhighway monstrosity is ugly and cuts the city off from the lake. But no one's ever been able to figure out what to do with it. The usual prescription is that it should be torn down or buried, and then people make the calculation of the cost, and the discussion disappears for another 10 years. So Les has a disarmingly simple idea for us. Les Klein.
Good morning. I believe quite firmly that cities, societies, countries are judged by how they treat their heritage. And love it or hate it, the Gardiner Expressway is part of Toronto's heritage. Those of us who live here know that Torontonians have a very interesting love-hate relationship with the car. We all support transit, and yet year after year we elect politicians to city council who refuse to allow us to build the densities required to actually create a viable transit system. Furthermore, we all support reduced car usage, and yet we get very angry when we can't park our car in front of the bank or the video store. So my question to you is, how in the world did we get here? I'm a big studier of history. So let's go back to the early 50s. The province of Ontario in the early 50s creates the municipality of Metropolitan Toronto to tie together a whole disparate group of 13 cities, towns, hamlets. And in the wake of the Hurricane Hazel disaster, which some of you may still remember, which devastated the region, and as importantly, the exploits of the infamous bank-robbing Boyd Gang, all of these kinds of crises highlighted the fact that better coordination among central government is required to deal with things like policing and the creation of municipal infrastructure. Frederick Gardiner, and I believe that Fred's grandson and his wife are here today, I hope they are. Frederick Gardiner was appointed the first chair of Metropolitan Toronto. And he proposed very early on the idea of an elevated expressway running through the downtown to tie all these little towns and villages into a single unified city. It was really quite a magnificent structure. It stretched 20 kilometers from what ultimately became Brown's Line in the west to Leslie Street in the east. And it included 9 kilometers of raised roadway that separated the vehicular traffic above from the activities on the ground below. It was actually a magnificent piece of civic architecture and engineering. And in 1975, I got my first view of downtown Toronto driving eastbound on the Gardiner Expressway for a job interview. And with the CN Tower under construction in the distance, it was actually a magnificent sight. It was full of promise and hope and excitement. But over the past few decades, the Gardiner has become, as Moses said, a target of disdain. It's been called ugly. It's been accused of being an obstacle to the waterfront, as well as a symbol of the evils of the automobile and suburban sprawl. There have been numerous discussions about what to do with it, including, of course, the notoriously expensive and absurdly disruptive Big Dig in Boston, which buried the Southeast Expressway. Louisville took its elevated highway, kept it there, and created a great lawn in front of the river for public usage. And Shanghai has used innovative lighting to create wonderful works of art out of its elevated highways. In 2001, the eastmost portion of the raised portion of the Gardiner, from the Don Valley Parkway to Leslie Street, was demolished. And yet somehow, in those intervening years, the promise of tying the Portlands to the south with Leslieville to the north failed to materialize. Maybe it has something to do with 6 lanes of traffic on the surface, whizzing by continuously 24 hours a day. And the reality is the slight increase in driving time for those people having to commute from the east has turned into 20 minutes or more every single day. And yet, if you look, the majesty of the original design and construction still can be seen and appreciated in a few places. This is just south of Fort York, for example. And once a year, the Gardiner Expressway and the Don Valley Parkway are closed to vehicular traffic for the Ride for Heart. And we've done this for many, many years. And if you haven't, you should. It's a magnificent experience to experience the city from above on a bicycle. And the reality, I'm sorry to say, Moses, is that the arguments to tear down the Gardiner just don't hold water. In fact, the Gardiner is only an obstacle for access to the waterfront when it's a grade. When it's elevated, the cars whiz by above, and in fact, you can walk through it without any problem. And furthermore, the idea of taking all those 200,000 cars that use the elevated expressway and putting them on the surface, now that would create a huge obstacle to the waterfront. Not to mention endless traffic jams, very frustrated pedestrians and drivers, and still not deal with the railroads that actually are an obstacle to the waterfront. And yet, somehow or other, the discussion of tearing down the next section of the Gardiner from the Jarvis to the Don Valley Parkway is going through City Council and an environmental assessment process with hardly a whimper of complaint or debate. Okay, this is the shameless self-promotion part of the presentation. My firm, Quadrangle, has in fact done some of the more creative and innovative adaptive reuse and renovation projects in the city. Many of you know the BMW showroom at the bottom of the Don Valley Parkway. As Moses says, we were his court architects for 25 years and did 299 Queen Street West, which I dare say is a bit of a landmark. This is the Toy Factory Lofts in Liberty Village. And as Moses mentioned as well, just around the corner from here at 130 Bloor Street, my partner Brian Kurtner is going to Montreal this weekend to receive an Innovation in Architecture Award from the Royal Architectural Institute of Canada for this project. And we think that in the same way as innovative thinking gave new life to those structures, it's time to think about the Gardiner in a different way. Nobody can deny that the Gardiner is an essential part of creating and providing access into and out of the city every single day. And it deserves a better and more creative fate than demolition and relegation to a landfill site. It really does demand creative, adaptive reuse. And for that, our proposal is to create the green ribbon. The green ribbon would create a 7-kilometer-long green roof above the elevated portions of the Gardiner Expressway, keeping the existing roadway intact. It would really become a linear park in the sky. It would create an opportunity for commuting, alternate ways of getting back and forth, and remove a major source of the heat island effect from the center of the city. The fundamental concept of the green roof is really very simple. The city has just passed a bylaw requiring every building built to have a green roof. So let's put a green roof on the Gardiner. This would provide paths for walking, cycling, places to relax, a lush landscape of grass, shrubs, and trees, and a light veil that is not only a work of art at night, but also forms part of the safety rail at the edge of the Gardiner. The idea is that access would be provided at all major intersections via stairs and ramps, and at key intersections, we'd also provide elevators, washrooms, concession stands, and an opportunity for people to go up and down in whatever manner that they wish. The benefits of the green ribbon are numerous. First and foremost, it's green. It eliminates the requirement to send tons and tons of material to landfill sites. And keeping the Gardiner will actually reduce the amount of pollution that would be created if the Gardiner were torn down and spectacular traffic jams created in the process of rebuilding the existing roadway system. And the green ribbon also promotes alternate ways of commuting. There are also opportunities to add solar panels or even small wind generators to the top of the green ribbon, which would provide all the power that's required to light all three levels of the structure, as well as snow melting for all the paths, for the bike paths and pedestrian paths. Any surplus energy we could easily return to the city grid. In addition, the green ribbon would dramatically improve public safety. First and foremost, the Gardiner is now protected from rain, snow, and ice. The roof above protects you from early morning and late afternoon glare, and it would have actually very little impact on the flow of traffic during construction. We've worked out a system where the construction could occur while traffic continues. And most importantly, it maintains the separation between vehicles moving above and access to the water below. Finally, the green ribbon would actually promote economic development. First of all, there would be opportunities to build near, above, and below the Gardiner. For example, as New York City has done under the Queensboro Bridge, where they created the Bridge Market project. These could even include concession stands on the roof for goods and services, as well as connections between the adjacent residential and office towers who could provide direct access to the linear park. The roof will also dramatically reduce the cost of snow removal, as well as slowing the deterioration from salt and water penetration on the roadway itself. And more importantly, it would raise the property values of those areas immediately adjacent to it, including some emerging neighborhoods in which the city has invested heavily. If you think about the lower Donlands, the East Bayfront, West Donlands, City Place, Fort York neighborhood, and even Liberty Village. So, wouldn't this be a great way to say that you've arrived in Toronto? The potential for future extensions of the green ribbon further along on the Gardiner and the Queen Elizabeth Way and even up the Don Valley Parkway could really give rise to a new magnificent urban structure. And the cost. I knew you were going to ask about the cost. We've been working with structural engineer extraordinaire Paul Ast from Jablonski Ast and Partners, and we've also been working with Mike Barker and Dennis Samsoon from Altus Hellier to do a little analysis of what it would take to build this building. And our estimate is that the total cost to construct the entire length of the 7 kilometers of raised roof above the existing elevated portions of the Gardiner, including upgrades to the existing structure, which never seem to find their way into the city budget today, is $500 to $600 million. Now, this is quite modest when you consider that the city's own estimates currently for taking down the Gardiner east of the Jarvis Street to the Don Valley Parkway is about $250 to $300 million. Extend that over the entire stretch of the Gardiner, elevated portion of the Gardiner, and you've got a number in the $1 billion to $1.5 billion range. In other words, we can build the green ribbon for half the cost that it would take to tear down the Gardiner and rebuild the roadway. And this way we get to keep the Gardiner. Now, why is that important? There are other examples of this kind of project in the world. Many of you have probably read about the newly opened High Line Park in New York City. The High Line was built on an old abandoned elevated railway, and they've created a fantastic park. Also in Paris, the Promenade Plantée was built on an old viaduct, which winds its way through neighborhoods and creates a linear park. But those didn't keep an existing elevated use in place and build on top, which is what we're proposing for the Gardiner Expressway. We really think that this is an idea whose time has come. We believe that the green ribbon would retain an existing needed use and civic asset, which provides the needed access into and out of the city of Toronto, the downtown area. And it would also give us time. It would give us time to imagine a new future for the existing roadway. It's not unreasonable to think that 20 or 25 years from now, when our relationship to the private car changes and we think differently about how we commute and we have the densities to support a great transit system, perhaps that roadway system becomes a transit way. But for now, it doesn't force us to go down a route that is irretrievable. Once we tear down the Gardiner, it is gone, and we have to live with the consequences. I know I have spoken to some city councilors, and some of them are certainly thinking about asking for new ways to think about the Gardiner. They are also opposed to the idea of demolishing the Gardiner. And we are advancing this idea really as a way not only of retaining a civic asset and really relishing and enhancing the heritage of the city of Toronto, but ultimately creating an important civic asset which would be the benefit of us all and to the future of Toronto. Now, we've provided each of you, at least some of you who have the bags, with this little booklet, which is called Greening the Gardiner, Toronto's Green Ribbon, which you are now free to show around as much as you would like. We've also opened an account on Facebook and on Twitter. So this is not a presentation, a take-it-or-leave-it situation. We would welcome, at this point in the debate, hopefully an open and rational debate, and would welcome your thoughts and your comments. Thank you.
Hey, look at that.
Thanks
Great
very much.
idea, great idea.
And well in time.
Beautiful.
Thanks so much.
That's terrific, guys. Very well done.